I want to ask you something. Think about the most important lessons you've learned in your life. The ones that genuinely changed how you see yourself, other people, or the world around you. Now, how many of those lessons came from a classroom? If you're like most people, the honest answer is almost none. The real lessons came from experience, from failure, from watching someone you respected make a decision you didn't understand at the time, until years later you did. And some of them, some of the deepest, most lasting ones, came from a book. Not a textbook. Not a manual. A book. Written by someone who lived something extraordinary, and figured out how to hand it to you. But here's the thing about the books on today's list. These aren't just good reads. They're not the books your English teacher assigned that you summarize from SparkNotes. Every single book on this list carries at least one idea so powerful, so disarmingly true, that people describe finishing it and sitting quietly for a few minutes before they could move on. That feeling of, I needed to read that. I just didn't know it yet. This list isn't built around genre, or bestseller rankings, or what sounds impressive on a shelf. It's built around one question: which books, once read, make you permanently different? 10 answers. Let's go. Book 10, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Starting at number 10 with a book that has been quietly changing people since 1960. To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Now, if you read this in school, I need you to forget that experience completely. Because there is almost no worse way to encounter this book than as a homework assignment with a deadline. Come back to it as an adult. Read it because you chose to. Because here's what this book is actually about, and it's not what most people remember from their 9th grade summary. It's about a little girl named Scout growing up in a small Alabama town in the 1930s, watching her father, a lawyer named Atticus Finch, defend a black man falsely accused of a terrible crime, knowing he will almost certainly lose, doing it anyway. But here's the thing that hits differently when you read it as an adult. Atticus doesn't defend Tom Robinson because he thinks he can win. He defends him because he believes every human being deserves someone willing to stand up and tell the truth on their behalf, regardless of the outcome. Most people don't realize this, but the most powerful lesson in this book isn't about racism or justice, as important as those themes are. It's about moral courage. The specific kind of courage it takes to do the right thing when doing the right thing costs you something real. Most of us will never face the dramatic version of that choice. But we face the small version every single day. The moment in a meeting where you could speak up and don't. The conversation you keep postponing because it's easier to stay quiet. The person who needed someone to stand in their corner, and you look the other way. Atticus Finch doesn't lecture you about those moments. He just shows you, quietly, with complete dignity, what it looks like when someone doesn't look away. That's an image that stays with you. For life. Book 9. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a**ck by Mark Manson. Number 9. And yes, the title is deliberately provocative. But stay with me. Because underneath the language is one of the most genuinely useful ideas written in the last decade. The Subtle Art of Not Giving a**ck by Mark Manson. Here's what this book is not about. It's not about being lazy. It's not about not caring about anything. It's not about giving up. It's about something far more specific and far more valuable. Choosing what you care about deliberately, instead of letting the world choose for you. Because here's the problem. We live in a time of infinite stimulation. Every notification, every scroll, every headline is competing for a piece of your limited attention and emotional energy. And if you don't decide what matters, everything demands to matter. Equally. Urgently. All at once. The result? You end up exhausted, anxious, and quietly hollow, Not because life is bad, but because you've been giving emotional weight to things that were never worth it. This is where it gets interesting. Manson's core argument is counterintuitive. He says the desire to feel good all the time is actually one of the biggest sources of suffering in modern life. Because when you make feeling good the goal, every moment of discomfort becomes a problem. Every failure becomes a crisis. Every criticism becomes an attack. But when you accept that a meaningful life includes discomfort, that struggle is not the enemy of the good life, it's the price of it, everything shifts. Most people don't realize this, but the question isn't, how do I avoid problems? The question is, which problems am I willing to struggle with? Because that answer, the problems you'll voluntarily fight through, that's the real map of your values. Book 8, The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. Number 8. And this is the one on this list that I think every person alive owes it to themselves, and to her, to read. The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. Anne was 13 years old when she began writing in this diary. She and her family were Jewish, hiding in a secret annex in Amsterdam during the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands. For 2 years she wrote. About her fears. About her dreams. About the boy she had a crush on. About the frustrating habits of the adults around her. About what she wanted to be when the war was over. She was 15 when the hiding place was discovered. She died in Bergen-Belsen concentration camp at 16. But here's the thing that makes this book unlike anything else ever written. It wasn't written for us. It wasn't written to be profound or historically significant. It was written by a teenager trying to make sense of an incomprehensible world, the exact same way teenagers have always written in diaries. And that authenticity, that completely unguarded, unperformed humanity, is what reaches through the page and grabs you. Most people don't realize this, but this diary doesn't make you feel sad in a passive way. It makes you feel responsible. Responsible for remembering. Responsible for recognizing. Responsible for understanding how ordinary circumstances, ordinary people, can become complicit in extraordinary evil when they stop paying attention. This is where it gets deeply relevant right now. Anne Frank wasn't a symbol when she was alive. She was a person, with opinions and jokes and ambitions and fears. Reading this book gives her back to you as a person, and that changes how you see everything. Book 7, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Number 7. Published in 1936. And somehow, it is still the most practically useful book about human interaction ever written. How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And yes, the title sounds manipulative. I know. But stay with me. Because here's what Carnegie is actually teaching. He's not teaching you how to trick people. He's teaching you how to genuinely make people feel valued, and why that changes every relationship you have. His core insight is almost embarrassingly simple. Every human being on Earth is primarily interested in themselves. Not in a selfish way, in a deeply human way. We all want to feel heard, understood, respected, and important. And the person who makes other people feel those things, consistently, genuinely, becomes magnetic. Not because they're charming or attractive or powerful, but because they're rare. But here's the problem with how most people go through life. They talk when they should listen. They correct when they should acknowledge. They wait for their turn to speak instead of actually absorbing what the other person is saying. And they wonder why their relationships, professional and personal, feel harder than they should. Most people don't realize this, but the single most effective thing you can do in almost any human interaction is to make the other person feel genuinely understood before you say a single word about yourself or your perspective. This is where it gets interesting. Carnegie wrote this book before psychology was widely understood. before emotional intelligence was a concept, before active listening was a buzzword in corporate training. He figured it out by watching, by paying attention, by taking detailed notes on what actually worked when humans tried to get along. 8 decades later, it still works. Because human nature hasn't changed. Read it. Then watch what happens to your relationships in the next 30 days. Book 6, 1984 by George Orwell. Number 6. Written in 1948 as a warning about the future. And the terrifying thing? It keeps getting more relevant. 1984 by George Orwell. The story takes place in a totalitarian society where a government called the Party controls not just what people do, but what they think. Where history is constantly rewritten to match the current political narrative. Where language itself is being simplified and manipulated to make dissent literally impossible to express. The most chilling invention in the whole book isn't the surveillance technology. It's a concept called doublethink. The ability to simultaneously hold two contradictory beliefs and accept both as true. To know something is false. And believe it anyway. Because believing it is safer. But here's the thing that makes this book so uncomfortable in 2025. Orwell wrote this as a nightmare. A dystopia. A warning about what could happen. But here's the problem. A lot of what he described doesn't feel like fiction anymore. The algorithmically curated reality where you only see information that confirms what you already believe. The language that shifts meaning depending on who's using it and for what purpose. The memory holding of inconvenient historical facts. Most people don't realize this, but Orwell wasn't just describing a political system. He was describing what happens to human thinking when the structures meant to protect truth start prioritizing power instead. This is where it gets important for you specifically. You don't need to live in a dictatorship for your thinking to become controlled. It happens slowly, invisibly, through the media you consume, the echo chambers you choose, the information you stop questioning because it already agrees with what you believe. 1984 is the book that teaches you to ask, how do I know what I know? And who benefits from me believing it? Those are the most important questions any free person can ask. Book 5, The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Number 5. And I want to prepare you, this is the hardest book on this list to read. The Road by Cormac McCarthy. It's a post-apocalyptic story about a father and his young son walking through a destroyed America. Cold, starving, hunted, trying to reach the coast. There's no backstory for what happened. No explanation. No hero arriving to save the day. Just a man. And a boy. And a road. And their promise to each other to keep going. To carry the fire. Now, here's the thing most people need to understand before I explain why this book belongs on a list that everyone should read once. It's not a survival story. It's not a thriller. It's not entertainment in any conventional sense. It's a book about love. Specifically, the most stripped down, essential, non-negotiable form of love. The kind that exists with absolutely nothing else left. No comfort, no convenience, no hope of things getting better. Most people don't realize this, but McCarthy wrote this book after the birth of his son. He said he woke up in the middle of the night, looked at his sleeping child, and imagined all the ways the world could fail him. The book was his way of processing that terror. And what he found, in the writing, was something unexpected. That even in a world with everything taken away, the one thing that survives, the one thing that can't be taken, is the choice to protect someone you love. This is where it gets profoundly personal. Every person reading this has someone they would carry the fire for. Someone whose existence makes the struggle worth it. This book reminds you of that. Quietly. Devastatingly. Beautifully. It will hurt to read. And when you finish it, you will call someone you love. Book 4, Thinking, Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Number 4. And this is the most scientifically rigorous book on this list. Thinking, Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. We've mentioned this one before, but it earns its own dedicated spotlight here because honestly, it's not just a book about decision making. It's a book about the fundamental gap between who you think you are and who you actually are. Here's the core idea. You have two thinking systems operating inside your brain simultaneously. System 1 is fast, automatic, emotional. It makes most of your decisions before you're even aware a decision is being made. It's the voice that judges someone's trustworthiness in the first 3 seconds of meeting them. The gut feeling, the snap reaction. System 2 is slow, deliberate, logical. It's the part of your brain that actually works through a problem step by step. But it's exhausting, it burns glucose, it gets tired, so your brain uses it as rarely as possible. But here's the brutal truth this book will not let you avoid. System 1, the fast, emotional, automatic system, is in charge of your life far more than you think. Your career choices, your romantic decisions, your political beliefs, your financial behavior, your friendships. Most of those were shaped by System 1, reacting, pattern matching, reaching for the familiar, while System 2 wrote a convincing story about why it was a rational choice. Most people don't realize this, but the gap between the person you think you are, rational, consistent, self-aware, and the person you actually are, reactive, biased, predictably irrational, is enormous. This is where it gets liberating rather than depressing. Because once you know about your biases, once you can name them, you gain the ability to slow down at the moments that matter most. To catch System 1 reaching for the wheel. To hand it back to System 2 before the decision is made. You don't become perfect. But you become a little more honest with yourself. And that honesty compounds. Over a lifetime, it changes everything. Book 3, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Number 3. And if you've been watching this channel for a while, you've heard me talk about this book before. I make no apologies for putting it on another list. Because it belongs on every list. Forever. Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. A psychiatrist. A Holocaust survivor. A man who lost everything, his wife, his family, his manuscripts, his freedom, and came out the other side with something almost no one else has ever articulated with this kind of clarity. He came out with an answer to the question most of us are quietly asking our entire lives and never saying out loud. What is the point of all of this? And Frankl's answer, earned in the most unimaginable conditions imaginable, is this. Meaning is not found. It is chosen. You cannot wait for life to hand you a reason to keep going. You have to decide, actively, deliberately, what you are living for. A person, a project, a belief, a future you're building toward. But here's the problem that most comfortable, modern people face. We have so many options, so much freedom, so much convenience, that we've actually made it harder to find meaning. Because meaning requires commitment. And commitment requires closing doors. And in a world of infinite options, closing doors feels like loss. Most people don't realize this, but freedom without meaning isn't liberation. It's a different kind of prison. This is where it gets personal for almost everyone watching. If you've ever had a period where everything looked fine on the outside, stable job, decent relationships, no obvious crisis, and felt completely empty anyway? That's not ingratitude. That's not weakness. That's what happens when a human being loses their answer to why. Frankl gives you the tools to find your answer. Not his answer. Yours. Read this one slowly. with a pen in your hand. Book 2, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Number 2. A book that has been on almost every list I've made on this channel. And it keeps coming back because it keeps deserving to. The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. A young shepherd. A dream. A journey to the Egyptian pyramids that takes him through love, loss, fear, betrayal, and the slow, hard discovery of who he actually is. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the plot, because the plot is almost beside the point. Here's what this book really is. It's a 200-page answer to the question you ask yourself at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep. Am I living the life I'm supposed to be living? Or did I take the safe road? And is it too late to change? Most people don't realize this. But Coelho didn't write this book for young people finding their path. He wrote it for people who already chose a path, and suspect they chose it out of fear rather than desire. That's a much larger audience. That might be most of us. But here's the thing that makes this book so enduringly powerful. It doesn't tell you to quit your job, abandon your responsibilities, or blow up your life in pursuit of some romantic ideal. It asks one simpler, more uncomfortable question. Are you moving towards something? Or are you just moving? This is where it gets interesting. Most people are incredibly busy. Packed schedules, full lives, constant movement. And yet, when you ask them what they're actually moving toward, there's a pause, a hesitation, a vague answer about stability, or comfort, or just getting through the week. The Alchemist is the book that breaks that spell. Gently, beautifully, but completely. Book 1, Viktor Frankl, No. The Real Number 1. Number 1. My absolute pick for the single book every person on earth should read at least once. And it might surprise you. It's not the most famous book on this list. It's not the one with the highest bestseller ranking. It's not the one most likely to show up in a top 10 article on Google. It's The Road by Cormac McCarthy. I know. I already featured it at number 5. But here's why it earns the top spot on a list about books everyone should read once in their life. Because most books give you something to think about. The Road gives you something to feel. And not a comfortable feeling. Not an inspiring one, in any conventional sense. It strips everything away. The noise, the ambition, the striving, the planning, the performing, all of it gone. Until you're left with one man, one child, one road, and one unbearable, beautiful question. What are you carrying the fire for? Not what are you working toward? Not what are you building? Not what do you want? What is the thing inside you, the person, the love, the reason, that you would keep going for even if everything else disappeared? Most people don't realize this, but that question is the most important one you'll ever answer. And most people go their entire lives without being forced to answer it honestly. This book forces you. It's 300 pages of the most stripped down, devastating, quietly hopeful prose ever written. And when you finish it, when you close it and sit with it for a minute, you will know something about yourself you didn't know before. That's what a great book does. That's what this one does. 10 books. 10 reasons to believe that words on a page can change the shape of a person. And here's what I want to leave you with. You will not live long enough to have every experience. You will not be born in every era, raised in every circumstance, tested in every way that a human being can be tested. But you can borrow someone else's experience for the price of a book. You can sit with Anne Frank in her hiding place. You can walk the road with a father who refuses to give up. You can see the world through Scout Finch's eyes in 1930s Alabama. You can survive a concentration camp with Viktor Frankl and come out the other side knowing what meaning feels like. None of that is abstract. None of it is theoretical. It becomes part of you. Your reference points shift. your capacity for empathy expands. Your tolerance for your own small fears gets a little thinner when you've spent time inside the great ones. That's what literature does. At its best. It doesn't just entertain you. It enlarges you. And an enlarged person, someone who has lived many lives through books, sees more options, feels more deeply, and makes better decisions than someone who has only ever lived inside their own single story. That's worth an evening. That's worth a weekend. That's worth a quiet Sunday with the phone face down and the right book open. Start anywhere on this list. But start. Tell me in the comments, which of these 10 have you already read? And which one do you think you needed to read most? And if there's a book you believe belongs on a list like this, one that genuinely changed something in you, drop it below. I read every single comment, and the next list I make is always partly built from your suggestions. If you want more of these every week, books that matter, broken down the way they deserve to be, subscribe and hit the bell. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.